What's going on, everybody? Brenden Schaeffer back here with another fantasy football mock draft. It's Saturday, August 26, 2023, so a lot of drafts probably going on this weekend, and then another batch of drafts coming up next weekend as we grow closer to the NFL season. I got a few requests in the recent YouTube comment sections for 10-team full PPR mock drafts with one flex. So that's about the most shallow league that I think most people standardly play. Unless you just have a group of 6 or 8 buddies that you do a league with. 10 teams is usually about as shallow as we often see. And I personally don't play in any leagues like this. All the leagues I do are at least 12 or more teams. But I know that there are a lot of people out there who do play in 10-team leagues. So I'm going to mock this from the 1.10, the turn essentially of a 10-team mock draft. What I'm looking for going into this mock draft, I do think there's a big difference if you're drafting a 10-team league versus a 12 or a 14. In the way you want to approach the onesie positions, quarterback and tight end, I think should be prioritized more heavily because you've got to find ways to gain advantages on your league mates. And if you can have Patrick Mahomes versus whoever the 10th quarterback is down here around Deshaun Watson territory, obviously that's a big advantage. And the margins are going to be slimmer in being able to find advantages at running back and wide receiver because you could go down this list and find guys that are studs that may be on benches in a 10-team league, whereas they would be prominently set into lineups in larger leagues. So that's where you have to try to find advantages at some of those positions. I will say, though, drafting for the 1.10, that's going to be difficult because I think about the different names that are going to be probable to pop up. Kelsey's going to be gone. It's going to be a little too soon, I think, to go Mark Andrews. But if I am drafting in a 10-team league toward the second half of this second round, Mark Andrews would be a big target for me. But let's just go ahead and jump in and see what the draft board gives us. And Kelsey goes 2. I don't think that's a bad call in a 10-team league. You can be elite at the tight end position, and that's what happens there. I'm thinking, though, no quarterbacks going in the first 10 picks. I might take one just because, again, I can try and have the advantage over the rest of the league if I do. But let's see what else I'm looking at here at the 10 spot. I'm not going to go quarterback and tight end. It's a little early for me to go Mark Andrews, but I could understand anybody doing it at the 10 turn here at round 1 and 2. Man, this is a tough spot to be in, honestly, because I feel like after the 9th pick, or honestly the 8th pick, I'd have Bijan Robinson ranked 8th. I really do think there's a tier break there. So you're not in a great spot right out of the gate to be picking from this late in the draft. So that's why I'm just going to do it. I'm going to take Patrick Mahomes. He's personally my number 1 quarterback on the board. I could see that going the other way because Mahomes doesn't really have the rushing upside of an Allen or a Hurts or even a Lamar Jackson if he's healthy this year as we expect. But I'm not going to let Mahomes slide by. First of all, it's just fun having Mahomes on your fantasy team because he is incredible at what he does. But I'm going to take an opportunity in the 10-team league to do something I would not ordinarily do in deeper leagues and take Patrick Mahomes. And whether you take him in the first round or with your pick at 2.1 in the second round, it really doesn't make a difference. But that buys me more time to think about the pick that I'm going to make. CeeDee Lamb, probably my favorite wide receiver on the board. A little bit concerned, though, about the offense under, I think, Brian Schottenheimer's there and Mike McCarthy going to call the plays. Don't really love that. Amon-Ra St. Brown feels a little early to take him, but I'm going to be boxed out from him for sure. There's just so many good wide receivers later that I'm going to go running back here. Very high on Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb behind Bijan Robinson is my guy, even over Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs after we saw those guys sign their 1-year contracts today, just before I kicked off this recording. So you are now free to move about the country when it comes to Barkley and Jacobs in your second round. I just prefer Nick Chubb. No Kareem Hunt there. I am hoping to see the Cleveland Browns get him more involved in the passing game than in years past. And in full PPR, that can be a nice boost. The value at other spots in a 10-team league, by the way, is outstanding. Tony Pollard going in the late or the mid-third is outrageous. I would be licking my chops if I were picking in the 5 or 6 range, a chance to have a Tyreek Hill or a McCaffrey or a Kupp, and then come back with an elite quarterback like Allen or Hurts, and then be able to get Tony Pollard in the 3rd round. Incredible. Mark Andrews nearly falling to us at the 3.10 would have been an absolute coup. We weren't fortunate enough to get him. And Amon-Ra St. Brown didn't fall. There was a part of me that hoped maybe he would, but it doesn't end up happening. I got to be honest with you. This draft, not shaking out the way that I hoped that it would. We got to find ways to be elite at certain positions. We're running out of time on this clock. I'm going to take Jahmyr Gibbs because I think he's going to be a PPR fiend. And I know that's heavily on the running back, but I was going to pick a running back with one of these two selections here at the 3-4 turn. And this just gives me more time to think about which wide receiver I want to come back and get. Like I said, this is a little bit of a tough spot. I don't like picking from the 10, but it also makes sense to do things that make you uncomfortable. Now we're looking at the wide receiver position. For our wide receiver 1 in a 10-team league, I'm not super comfortable with Devontae Smith because he's the wide receiver 2 on his own team. In a 14-team league, I'm totally cool with it because I think there's upside for Smith to absolutely smash in that Eagles offense. But I need somebody that I feel like has a higher ceiling in terms of target share. DK Metcalf is a little bit concerning in that regard as well. If you think about Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith and Jigba on the Seattle Seahawks, which brings me to Calvin Ridley. I don't think it's incredible value necessarily to have to take him with the first pick in the 4th round of a 10-team league, but Calvin Ridley could absolutely smash this year with Trevor Lawrence. I think he's got that wide receiver 1 upside with the Jacksonville Jaguars, so that's going to be our pick from the 4.1, I should say. And now we're really going to have to dig in and find some value in these later rounds to bring it back. You always put yourself at a bit of a disadvantage at the RB and wide receiver position when you draft an early quarterback the way that we did, but it just felt like the move that needed to be made with where we were and with the guys that went off in the first round. So we're set at quarterback with Mahomes. We feel very good about the pass-catching running backs that we're going to be able to have in this draft. We got to get better at wide receiver, and I'm not high on Terry McLaurin. Looking at the board, though, I think DJ Moore is probably going to be a pick that we take here with one of these two draft selections. I just think he can be the wide receiver 1 for Justin Fields. We have seen young, mobile, running-type quarterbacks gain an alpha wide receiver, and then suddenly they're studs at their position throwing the football as well. Happened with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. Happened the previous year with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. I think DJ Moore is that caliber of receiver, and he can be that alpha that Justin Fields needs to take the next step in his game. So we're happy about taking that. Now, here's the other part of a 10-team league that's a little bit different. You're okay with taking shots on guys that if they don't pan out, you can just kind of set them on your bench and you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to fill a robust lineup that has 2 flexes or 3 wide receivers or both. And in a 10-team league, there's just value everywhere to be found. We're going to double-check the running back spots. We don't really love any of these guys here, so we're going to go wide receiver again. We know what the tight end landscape looks like. Maybe a Kyle Pitts gets back to us or a Dallas Goedert in the next round. We would feel okay about that. But otherwise, we're going to just end up, unfortunately, having to wait a little bit on tight end because we prioritize QB. But when I talk about taking shots on upside, Drake London, Christian Watson both fit that billing, and I'm a little more comfortable with Christian Watson. Again, I think he's the wide receiver 1 for the Green Bay Packers. Do you trust Jordan Love? If you do, this could be a great pick in the 6th round. And it's one of those deals where he's in our flex right now. But with these upcoming draft picks, we're going to be able to find players that we can plug into our flex if it turns out that Jordan Love isn't even 60 or 70% as good as Aaron Rodgers. And if he's not, yeah, Christian Watson probably flames out and is not somebody we're excited to put into our lineup. But if it pans out, the athletic upside that Christian Watson possesses, it's rare in the NFL. So we feel good about taking shots on guys with upside because I did do 6 bench spots in this league. I figure if you're in a 10-team league, the benches are probably deeper because more players might as well get drafted. So we're going to take shots on upside throughout, and we always do that, but even more so, I think, in this setting, it makes sense. Trying to figure out exactly the way we want to go here. Like having wide receivers in our flex in a full-point PPR. That's definitely something that we're going to be consistent with. And I think we're going to take another shot on a guy who maybe not the wide receiver 1 for his team, but Mike Williams in that Charger offense, paired with Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator, that's another boom-bust type of player, very similar to Christian Watson. And I really don't feel compelled at any point to take like a safe option to plug into my flex because odds are if I take 3 or 4 boom-bust receivers on my bench here, one of them is going to be able to fill this flex spot on a weekly basis. So that's going to be the gamble that we make. We're a little bit heavier now at wide receiver than we are at running back, which I don't totally mind. I'm not going to just take a tight end just because I don't have one yet, because I really feel like with Goddard, we lose a lot of value. I might as well drop all the way down to Dalton Kincaid, have maybe another rookie tight end like Laporta or somebody else on my bench and just approach the tight end position that way. It's kind of a cesspool after Dallas Goedert, in my opinion. We're going to try to find some upside here. I'm on the board. I'm taking George Pickens. It might be a little bit of a reach, but just like with Mike Williams, well, not really Mike Williams, but with Christian Watson, Pickens and the Pittsburgh Steelers, you have a quarterback that we don't really trust in and not really entirely sure what it's going to be with Kenny Pickett this year. But if he pans out, if he takes that step forward, George Pickens is instantly a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy. I really do believe that. Athletically, he's just a freak. Christian Watson is a freak. Mike Williams is a freak. You can sense the trend with how we wanted to go about this. Let's see what we sacrificed, though, at the running back position by just stacking wide receivers so heavily here. Some of our targets like Javonte Williams and James Cook do go, but I feel like we still have value on the board with guys that can potentially be relied upon in our lineups at some point in time. Now we're going to have to get a little bit creative. I still see Dalton Kincaid a little bit of a ways off. I think we can try and play the ADP game again with him, but he's a tight end that certainly does have upside. I'm still, believe it or not, I'm still kind of looking at the wide receiver position because when I think about ways to improve my roster during the year, it's going to be with guys that explode and then I can afford to trade them. And Quentin Johnston or Gabe Davis are two guys that we're looking at. We already have one share of a Chargers wide receiver, but we're going to take another one with Quentin Johnston here just because if everything breaks right for one of these guys, Williams or Johnston, which may involve the other one getting hurt, to be quite honest, the one that remains is going to be an absolute stud for our lineup. And right now we're looking at these guys as bench bats. So that's the way we're going to go about it, but we're not going to prolong this any further when it comes to the running back position. We do feel like we need to add somebody. I want to look at where this line is. Zach Charbonnet right above the line of our next pick, and he's the running back that we want, especially in a full PPR format, so that's the move we're going to make. Looking at some of the names going off the board here, Zay Flowers could be wide receiver 1 for Baltimore and Lamar Jackson. If he is a guy that takes a step forward as a rookie, maybe that's a guy we could have done instead of Quentin Johnston. Jahan Dotson, same way. If you like Sam Howell, you got to think about what offenses you're going to bet on, and it's just pure upside when you get to this point in your draft, especially in a 10-team league, other than what we're going to have to do at the tight end position, which we ended up playing that ADP game, and we won. So we're not going to wait any longer. Dalton Kincaid's the guy that we like in this spot in the Bills offense. Yeah, he's in our starting lineup, and that's a bit of a risk. So we'd like to double back with another tight end for our bench if we can do so later on. But that's going to be the Mr. Irrelevant pick of our draft. Let's go ahead and find one more player. We've only got 3 running backs. We definitely are going to want to find one more. It's still going to be rookie upside that I think we're chasing. I'm doing this draft on Saturday, August 26th. As of right now, Jonathan Taylor is not a Miami Dolphin, but if he becomes one, Devon Achane certainly is a wasted pick at this point in time. But if he doesn't, man, that ends up being a potentially league-winning type player this late in the draft. Khalil Herbert, probably a little bit safer, right? If you're just looking for somebody to plug into your lineup, it's going to be a safer pick. But I want to show you when we're done here just how many quality running backs are going to end up still on the board. As a result, we're taking the swing with Achane, assuming that Jonathan Taylor does not become a Dolphin, which might be a bad assumption. Like, I'm probably 50-50, maybe even 60-40 that he does land with Miami because reports indicate that they're aggressively pursuing him, and we know that Jonathan Taylor wants out of Indy. So that's just going to be maybe the way that it shakes out ultimately. But if it doesn't happen, Achane, with his speed and upside in a Mike McDaniel offense, they want guys like him. But here's my point. This is the last draft, or I should say the last pick of the entire 10-team draft. I'm going to give you some running back names that I would love to have in deeper leagues stashed on my bench. Tank Bigsby is an injury away from being a top 10 running back. And even without an injury to Travis Etienne, I think he has a really good season as the number 2 there. Jalen Warren could very well overtake Najee Harris based on performance at some point in this season. He should be rostered. Kendre Miller is going to get playing time the first 3 weeks of the season with Kamara out for his suspension. What does he do with that time to potentially cement himself? I like Deuce Vaughn. It's a little bit of a scat back play for a 10-team league, but in deeper leagues, I want him on my bench if I can get him. Like, there's a ton of running backs still available that I think are worthwhile. I'm taking Sam Laporta down on the clock because, like I talked about, the one position that we're really weak at is tight end with just a couple of rookies. But with Dalton Kincaid, I feel like the Bills are going to use him more as a wide receiver than a tight end. That's what the reports are saying. So he's my late-round target at tight end. I just see more upside with him than any of these names that have gone after him. Okonkwo, Kmet, Dalton Schultz. I feel like in the Josh Allen offense, man, Dalton Kincaid, if they use him like they say, they haven't said it, but the way the reports are going, if they use him that way, it's Dalton Kincaid as a late-round pick at tight end. But Sam Laporta, similar story. Rookie that's going to be the tight end one for the Lions. They're expected to throw the football around quite a bit, so we feel pretty good about that. This is not the most robust draft. Honestly, I don't love the way it shook out, but I stuck to taking guys that are my targets. Don't just because you're in a 10-team league go, well, this is who's at the top of the ADP. I got to take him. Like, think about strategically each pick that you're making, and I think I can justify basically all of them in terms of, all right, Ridley, wide receiver 1 for his team. DJ Moore, same. Christian Watson, same. George Pickens, same. Mike Williams or Quentin Johnston, either of those guys are going to be huge factors for a very pass-oriented Chargers team, especially if something should happen to Keenan Allen, who's like 31 years old and has historically dealt with injuries. At the running back spots, you see Charbonnet, A-Chain. It's high upside handcuffs at the worst. At the best, I think it's 2 guys, especially in Charbonnet's case. They're going to catch passes for their team. So this is kind of the way I want to approach it. I had to be elite somewhere, and I chose to be elite with the Kansas City Chiefs quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, at the onesie position. If you're drafting from this spot and you happen to believe that Josh Allen is a better quarterback for fantasy this year than Mahomes or Jalen Hurts, I mean, that's definitely a possibility with the rushing upside those 2 guys have. Don't be afraid to buck tradition, to buck ADP and say, I'm going Josh Allen at the 1.10 or the 2.1. You've got to make your own decisions. But I just did this to demonstrate that, like, quarterback early or tight end early, I don't think that's necessarily a mistake. Here's another way we could have gone. Let's say we went Mark Andrews with the 2.1 instead of Nick Chubb. Or maybe we go Mark Andrews at the 2.1 instead of Patrick Mahomes or the 1.10. All right, we're elite at tight end at that point, very high on what Andrews is going to do this year. Maybe we're able to stack Lamar Jackson here in the 3rd round. Yes, does it mean we would have had to go more heavily on running backs in these rounds? It would have, but Cam Akers could be a workhorse for the Rams. You know, Alexander Madison could be a workhorse for Minnesota. I'm pretty high on James Cook and Javonte Williams going in the 9th round. Like, I could have perhaps taken those guys in the 8th. It just seems like the value isn't really there for the 1.10 position. And so don't be discouraged if that's your draft spot. If you're drafting near the turn, just say, I've got to stick to my guns on the players that I like, and I don't have to be afraid to reach a little bit on ADP. Because, yeah, Javonte Williams being drafted in the early 9th, it would have looked a little silly taking him in the 8th, knowing what we know. But we're at the 8.1 pick. We don't get to pick where we are in that draft in the 8th round, and that's our last chance to get Javonte Williams. And if Javonte Williams ends up smashing for the Denver Broncos because he looks healthy off the ACL tear, nobody's going to look at you and make fun at the end of the season when you're holding the trophy, right? So you do have to ultimately make the decisions that you think are best for your team. But how do you think I did here? What would you have done a little bit differently when you look over the draft board and see the picks that I made? Obviously heavy on wide receiver in the mid-rounds, but in full PPR, I think that's the way I want to do it. I've got a lot of bullets to fire potentially at this flex spot. I'm covered in case anything doesn't pan out with our top 2 guys. I think we're going to end up having a really strong roster in terms of our 2 wide receiver spots. I've got enough names here that I think they're going to be able to fill out, and the same thing with the flex. We know we've got a top 3 quarterback, and Nick Chubb is a guy that I really want at the RB position. A little bit of a risk with the rookie running backs in Jahmyr Gibbs, Zach Charbonnet, and Devon Achane, but I also believe there's going to be running backs on waivers, and we're going to have guys who do contribute in PPR, which this is a full PPR setting. So that's the explanation for some of the moves that I made. Let me know what you think in the comments section below, and make sure to hit subscribe to the channel if you enjoy videos like this. And again, this video came as a result of somebody requesting to do a 10-team draft from the 1.10 full PPR with 1 flex. So let me know in the comments below if you have a request for a mock of the type of league that you are doing coming up over the next couple of weekends, and we'll try to make it happen here on the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll talk to you next time on Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football. Peace.